early 2023, the city of Sangolqué in Ecuador's Pichincha region was shaken by a tragic event that left the community in disbelief. The brutality of the crime was unsettling, but even more shocking was its motive: a $600 theft. Was the life of 37-year-old Paula Ortega Alcocer truly worth only $600? Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figueroa Lara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a strong interest in the hospitality industry. After completing her studies, Paula became actively involved in the growth of her family's business, which specialized in manufacturing party goods. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and well-known in Sangalqui and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's father had started the business in his youth, supplying party goods across Ecuador. Over time, the venture flourished, allowing him to produce balloons, piñatas, and other festive items. The expansion of the business led to the opening of several stores, not just in Sangalqui but also in the capital, Quito. Each family member took responsibility for the development and management of the enterprise. Paula's father continued to expand the main production line, opening new workshops to produce balloons, garlands, party hats, and various other items. Each of his 3 children managed a store, giving them the opportunity to personalize and shape the business according to their own vision. Paula's entrepreneurial spirit led her beyond just managing a store. She organized a party planning service within the company, which turned out to be a great success. It seemed Paula had found her calling, bringing joy to people, which made her truly happy. While the business ventures of the Ortega family flourished for a long time, unfortunately, Paula Ortega's personal life was not as successful. Despite her youthful and joyous demeanor, she faced significant hardships in her private life. Paula's first marriage to Carlos Pedro turned out to be unhappy. After the birth of their daughter, Carlos developed an alcohol addiction. He began disappearing from home and stealing money from Paula's store. His infidelity was the last straw, leading Paula to end the marriage and find herself alone with her daughter. This period was particularly challenging for Paula as she lost hope in finding personal happiness. However, the psychological support of her family and her passion for her work helped her regain a sense of normalcy in her life. A decade later, Paula met Christian Diego, a tall, dark-haired, and handsome man. Christian was 4 years younger than Paula. Having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was cautious with the persistent young suitor. Christian proved to be calm and reliable, quickly bonding with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed Paula. After 2 years of relationship, her heart warmed to him, leading to a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian embraced Paula's daughter as his own, and they soon welcomed another daughter, Maria. Christian and Paula spent 5 years together, with Christian fully integrating into Paula's father's company. He was entrusted with finding locations for new stores, which often kept him away from home. Coming from a modest working-class family, Christian had always dreamed of owning a large business. Unfortunately, some people can conceal their dark sides so well that one might live for years alongside ruthless criminals without suspecting a thing. However, the truth eventually comes to light when evil erupts in the most unexpected ways. Paula Ortega and her husband, Christian, appeared to be the epitome of a happy, successful couple to their family, friends, and neighbors. However, this perception was only surface deep. In 2000, Paula's father passed away after a long illness. His death not only devastated the family, but also turned their business upside down. Christian, driven by a desire for power and the wealth it brought, eagerly sought to take Paula's father's place in the business. However, his lack of skill led to one failed deal after another. As a result, Christian began to vent his frustration on his family, initially in secret, but later openly. He began to abandon his family, indulging in a life of debauchery. Women and alcohol became his escape into a world of pleasure and recklessness. With Paula's father no longer there to restrain him, Christian's true nature began to surface. Having already experienced a traumatic marriage, Paula refused to endure this behavior again. The couple's home became a battleground of endless scandals, revealing Christian's true nature as an ambitious egotist. craving only power and unquestioned obedience. After a particularly nasty argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing her husband's reaction. The news of this drastically changed Christian's behavior. Unwilling to lose his place in the successful family, he stopped his outrageous conduct and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be caught up in a whirlwind of confusion, and professed his love and value for his family. His eloquence persuaded Paula. Not wanting to be alone again, she gave him a second chance. In a gesture of reconciliation, Christian suggested organizing a romantic dinner at their home. Paula agreed. She sent their daughters to her parents' house and began preparing for the evening. Inside, she was aflutter with excitement. Deep down, she still dreamed of a happy, strong family and was doing everything she could to preserve it. The evening at the Ortega home was one of celebration and comfort. The living room was lit up with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly illuminated by the yellow glow of candles. Christian uncorked a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night could have been genuinely reconciliatory had it not been for a sudden proposal from Christian that disrupted the peace. Christian, a co-owner of the Alcazar company, revealed to his wife a significant misstep. In his pursuit to replace Paula's father and gain full control, he had made a costly mistake in an important tender, leading to substantial losses for the company. Now, the firm desperately needed a new investor, implying that a part of the company would officially change hands. Paula was adamantly against this, believing her father's business should remain a family affair. Despite Christian's persuasion, she stood her ground, infuriating him. He had already found an investor and was eager to complete the deal without complications. Their dinner, and by extension their relationship, soured. January 2nd, 2023 seemed like any other day. Paula took her younger daughter to the playroom before heading to her shop for work. She had a large order to prepare involving assembling balloon fountains and party decorations for a themed event. During her lunch break, two men knocked on the shop's door. Although closed, Paula opened it, expecting a courier to pick up the balloon bouquets. The men, slim and dressed identically as if they were twins, startled her with their dark hoodies. They lingered, scanning the shop before splitting up. As Paula called out to them stating the shop was closed for lunch, they cornered her against the wall. The tension of the silent scene was broken by a knock on the glass door. The men hastily exited the shop. A smiling young courier arrived, unwittingly rescuing Paula from the unknown assailants. Shaken, Paula handed over the package, closed the shop, and with trembling hands called her mother. She was visibly frightened, a sentiment she expressed over the phone. Paula's mother suggested reporting the unsettling incident at her shop to the police, but Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright since nothing harmful had actually occurred. She didn't reopen her shop that day, her thoughts consumed by Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the two mysterious men. Seeking solace, Paula decided to take a stroll through the city. She stopped at a nearby cafe for some coffee, walked through the park to breathe in the fresh air, and then visited her sister. Over cups of fragrant tea, they engaged in a heart-to-heart conversation. Overwhelmed by the day's shocking events, Paula confided in her sister, not only about the scary encounter at her shop, but also about the difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had drastically changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and openly being unfaithful. Paula chose not to mention his proposal about merging the company with a new investor, as she habitually kept her personal struggles to herself. But that day, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame over tolerating such demeaning treatment. "He's a peculiar being. My sister was lively, happy, cheerful, enterprising, hardworking, an extremely gentle and kind mother. She should have been receiving energy from him," Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, would later say. Paula spoke of her long-term life plans, her desire for her daughters to grow up and become professionals, and her intention to continue her business. She was selfless and tirelessly hardworking, Adriana recalled. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. A phone call from Christian interrupted her. He was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would come to the shop to pick her up as well. His hurried speech was interspersed with children's voices. Paula didn't get a chance to tell him about the frightening incident at her shop, especially since she suspected him to be involved. Reluctantly, Paula returned to work, once again prioritizing her family's well-being over her own. She didn't have to wait long. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't deny his little princess. He informed Paula that the girls were at home and eagerly waiting for hamburgers for dinner. In what has become a modern family tradition, Christian took Paula not to the nearest fast food joint, but to a restaurant courtyard at a shopping center several blocks from their home. Parking the car beside a secluded wall and locking it securely, he left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a taxing day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the impending danger. Shortly, she recognized two familiar figures near the car talking loudly and circling the vehicle. Recognizing them as the unexpected visitors from her shop, Paula tried to stay calm, trusting that the car was secure and Christian would return soon. Suddenly, the car's lights flashed and the door locks disengaged. In a panic, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms, but she was trapped with no escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat, while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before darkness enveloped her. Paula sustained 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. After the brutal attack, the assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood. Frantically, he called emergency services but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving necessary medical attention. Christian, overwhelmed by grief and shock at the loss of his wife, reacted with loud cries and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The sudden violent end of Paula Ortega left a community in shock and a family in profound grief, raising questions about the motive and identity of the attackers. The initial theory of the prosecution was a violent end inflicted during a robbery. It was later discovered that $600 and a gold necklace were missing from Paula's purse. This began an investigation. The prosecution's theory was confirmed when footage from city cameras showed 2 unknown men who had visited Paula's store earlier that day in the vicinity. Both were in hoodies, making it impossible to create a clear image of their faces, and their vague descriptions provided no clarity. 2 months after the tragic event, Paula's family demanded justice, but the investigation was at a standstill. A turning point came when Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, gave testimony casting doubt on Christian's innocence. She informed the investigators about a conversation she had with Paula on the day of the incident. Adriana also mentioned that Christian regularly committed infidelity and domestic violence against Paula, who was contemplating divorce. This provided a perfect motive as Christian, driven by ambition, could not afford to lose his wealth and status in the event of a divorce. The prosecution investigated this angle. During a search of their home, incriminating messages were found on Christian's phone, indicating multiple affairs and turbulent marital relations. A critical piece of evidence was documentation prepared for the transfer of the company to a private individual, which Paula had refused to sign. Following these revelations, the incident was investigated as a suspected homicide. As the prosecution continued to gather information implicating Christian Diego, new evidence emerged, unraveling the complex web of the couple's relationship. 2 weeks after the incident, we found out he transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, said Adriana, Paula's sister, adding another layer of suspicion to the already convoluted case. The most shocking aspect, as claimed by relatives, was that Christian made a payment using Paula's account while she was dying from her injuries. Instead of immediately helping his gravely wounded wife, Christian seemingly bided his time. Investigations confirmed this information. The identity of the woman who received the transfer from Christian that day was established as 28-year-old Laura from Christian that day was established as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. Urgently summoned for questioning, She revealed that she had noticed her bank card missing a couple of days earlier, but didn't think much of it as her brother often used her card. The electronic payment records showed a transfer of $2,000 from Christian on January 2nd at 20:05. However, Laura denied any acquaintance with Christian. Her solid alibi at the time of the incident absolved her of any involvement. She was released and the investigation hit a dead end again. Days later, Laura returned to the police stating her brother had returned the bank card as she had suspected. She provided a full description of her brother's appearance, which matched one of the criminals caught on surveillance cameras near the car. In the chaos of fleeing the crime scene, one attacker forgot to pull up his hood. The identities of Byron and Ortiz Castillo, two repeat offenders with a substantial criminal history, were established. The brothers were apprehended. But what could possibly link two seasoned criminals to a seemingly respectable and successful family man? Further investigation revealed that the attacks on Paula had been carried out repeatedly by the Castillo brothers. But why were these repeat offenders targeting this young woman? On December 8, 2022, Paula Ortega faced a harrowing incident at a gas station when her car was stolen. Distracted by a young man, his accomplice quickly jumped behind the wheel and sped off. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car that day. Surveillance footage identified the two familiar culprits. Coincidentally, on the day of the theft, Paula unknowingly came face to face with her future assailant. However, the car theft case took an unexpected turn when Christian intervened, claiming the thieves had contacted him. He met with them and retrieved all of Paula's personal belongings, including her wallet. This development cast further doubt on Christian's innocence. Seasoned investigators were puzzled by the widower's boldness in shielding the criminals. Surveillance cameras played a crucial role in identifying the carjackers. As Christian realized he was under suspicion, he concocted a new defense narrative involving extortion by two criminal brothers demanding a large sum of money. But before he could deploy his version of events, the police executed a swift interrogation strategy. Separating the suspects in suggesting one had confessed, they obtained a confession from Martin Castillo. He admitted that more than 2 months earlier, Christian had paid them $2,000 to murder his wife, promising another $2,000 after the deed. During a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal knife wounds on the terrified woman. Realizing the crime was uncovered, he remorselessly divulged all details of their arrangement with Christian. Martin revealed that the car theft and the attack on Paula's shop were also parts of Christian's plan to pressure her. By chance, Paula lived a few hours longer than intended. On November 29, 2023, all 3 suspects appeared in court. The prosecution presented a comprehensive picture of the murder day, pieced together from various sources. Videos from surveillance cameras in the area where Christian parked the car, subjected to audio and video forensic analysis, unveiled a chilling soul-freezing narrative. In chilling surveillance footage, Christian Diego is seen exiting his car and heading towards a shopping center elevator. Moments later, he remotely unlocks his car from half a block away, allowing 2 assailants to enter the vehicle and attack Paula. The prosecutor's report noted Christian's odd behavior post-attack, repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, pausing, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Surprisingly, upon finding his wife bleeding profusely, he showed no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a distant hospital. Christian's actions, meticulously reconstructed from surveillance videos, particularly in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, were cold and calculating. As she bled in the car but was still alive, Christian, standing nearby, callously transferred money to his accomplices for the assault. Paula's family lawyers urged the court to consider these videos as aggravating factors in the crime. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves the crime was premeditated. Hours before the attack, around 1:30 p.m., 2 individuals entered Paula's store dropped off nearby by Christian. This implies the crime was intended to occur earlier during the lunchtime closure when Paula was alone. Prosecutor Marlon Calderon highlighted inconsistencies. How did the assailants know the couple would be at the eatery if they weren't tailing them? Yet they arrived on time to commit the crime. Christian's actions, not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the eatery, His 1,000 times pacing before aiding his wife, phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic are key evidence for charging him with orchestrating the femicide. Femicide, defined as the intentional murder of a woman simply because she is a woman, was a central theme in the trial of Christian and Paula Ortega's troubled relationship. Shockingly present in today's society, this hate crime was exemplified through Christian's younger age, which seemed to fuel his contempt and abuse towards Paula. Despite her success, Paula lived in a metaphorical golden cage, masking and enabling her husband's tyrannical behavior, allowing him to assert dominance. Years of silence culminated in Christian's sinister plot to seize control of Paula's thriving party empire and gain sole guardianship of their daughter, Maria. Testimonies from over 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, alongside thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's true motives and objectives. Without legal signing rights, he sought to coerce Paula into transferring her company shares. However, his plan failed. Christian didn't physically harm Paula but inflicted severe psychological abuse, artfully concealed under the guise of a perfect family life. According to the Prosecutor General's report, video evidence led to Christian's preventive isolation as the crime's orchestrator. This measure isn't an arrest, but a strategy to neutralize a societal threat. Following this action, Christian planned to flee. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, accused of orchestrating his wife's demise, his defense team worked tirelessly to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute crucial evidence like surveillance footage and falsified company transfer documents. Desperate, the defense then attempted to depict the accused as suffering from a mental disorder, citing episodes of sudden rage. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian, but he was declared competent. His defense counsel, realizing the gravity of the situation, advised Christian to flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and suggesting he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. However, this plan to escape justice failed. Christian's search for Central American flight tickets raised alarm bells with the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly ordered an 8-hour detainment of Christian Diego, followed by charges and the disclosure of case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Pending trial, the suspect was held in preliminary detention, pursued as the alleged mastermind behind a heinous act that left 2 young children motherless and an entire family grieving an irreplaceable loss. The Ortega family demands justice for this atrocious crime, emphasizing the devastating impact on the children and their irreplaceable loss. In a case that gripped public attention, the jury concluded that Christian and his 2 accomplices were guilty of a meticulously planned intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful Christian and his associates were sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Rumiawi expressed their solidarity with the tragic loss of Paula Alcocer. The institution extends its deepest sympathies to the family and friends affected by this incident. The unfortunate demise of this esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife, who contributed significantly to the canton's development and brought prosperity to those in her circle, is deeply mourned, their statement read. Paula's case emerged as a prominent instance of violence against women following the Latin American Association for Alternative Development's report of 332 fatalities due to gender-based violence in 2022. Monday, September 14, 2015, was remembered by 16-year-old Nolan Buchanan as the best day of his life. The day before, he had spent Sunday with his girlfriend. A traditional morning mass with his girlfriend's family, followed by a get-together with friends and a wonderfully romantic evening. Waking up on Monday morning next to his favorite girl, the teenager felt like a free, successful, and influential businessman before whom the whole world is open. After all, he was now the owner of Buchanan Construction. The young man was going to inherit cars, a house, land, monetary assets, and made plans how he would manage the family business alone, and certainly do it better than his father, who brought the company to bankruptcy. It would seem that what could go wrong? Already on October 1st, 2015, Nolan Keith Buchanan was arrested at Bonita High School in Bonita, California by the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. Nolan was incarcerated at the Juvenile Treatment Center, JTC, in South Lake Tahoe until June 13, 2018, when an El Dorado County jury of 7 men and 5 women found Buchanan guilty of 3 charges. The jury took just 2 hours to reach a verdict. The young man was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole from the 25th year of his sentence. This is how his plan to take over the family business ended. Neighbors and classmates spoke of Nolan as a model kid and a good student. As far as I know, he was a good kid, Anita high school student Campbell Ruxton would later say in an interview. He always cared about school. He seemed very kind. He was very nice. I'm even surprised he was arrested. But what really happened in the Buchanan family? Let's break down this horrific case in detail. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she came to apply for a job at his firm as an office manager. By the time they met, Adam was already divorced and raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Cheerful, sociable, and cheerful blonde immediately attracted the attention of the owner of the company. The interest was mutual. Molly fell in love, started a romance that turned into a serious relationship, and her move to Adam. Molly dreamed of a real, loving, friendly family and tried to build a wonderful relationship with her stepson. Soon, she became pregnant. Gavin was born. People who knew the Buchanans claimed that they were a fairly close-knit family of 4. The head of the family, who owned a construction company, earned enough to ensure a comfortable life, and the family even purchased vacation property in El Dorado County, California. A small cabin sat on 19 acres in Greenwood, a rustic cabin with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, took an active role in remodeling the house, and the family began to visit there often. On September 13, 2015 at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township in western El Dorado County on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property. A cabin located on the property was still smoldering but had burned to the ground. The fire department personnel observed charred remains in the ashes. The scene of the fire was not touched, and at 11 a.m., firefighters called the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. No one had yet realized what was at the scene. Firefighters were almost certain that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped in the house. The arriving coroner was faced with a daunting task. The remains of the house were still smoldering, and there was no way to examine the inside of the house. They had to wait for the flames to finally die down and for the temperature to drop slightly. As the coroner examined the house, he smelled the sweet odor of burnt flesh and later discovered a human skull and a burned chest. It appeared that the tragedy had claimed someone's life. The officer requested backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived and conducted a thorough examination of the scene. The conclusion was obvious. The small, secluded, and remote cabin was not the primary residence of its owners. Rather, it was most likely a country cabin where people came to vacation. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the property adjacent to the cabin. It was possible to run the license plates and find out who the car belonged to. The owner may have been the victim of the wildfire. It didn't take long to find out that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by a man named Adam Buchanan. The man in question lived 160 miles from the scene of the accident, about 3 hours away in Bonita, California. This information confirmed the assumption of the police, who decided that the house was just a country residence for those who vacation here from the hustle and bustle of the city. It remained to be seen who was inside, Mr. Buchanan himself or someone else. The name of the owner of the company gave the detectives their first clue with which they began their investigation. The Bonita police officers were tasked with checking to see if all of Buchanan's family members were well and at home. They went to the correct address and were soon in the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. At a knock on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage came out. He greeted the uniformed officers with surprise and asked what brought them to him. The officers decided to first find out who was in the house so as not to frighten the household. Perhaps the company car had been taken by someone from the company and not the owner himself. Nolan Buchanan said his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were due back in the evening. According to him, His father had left him to look after the house. Investigators did not yet have sufficient reason to believe the remains in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information received and the discovery of the remains, believed to be those of two people, by the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing in the El Dorado County fire. The next day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to Nolan's home to talk to him more thoroughly and try to figure out whose lives the fire had claimed. Officers were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They said that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, does his own home repairs and therefore travels there very often. The parents were very concerned as they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until now. From the story, the officers learned that the house is connected to generators, but at the time of the tragedy, it had no electricity. There were, however, gas cylinders inside. This gave two theories. The fire could have been either accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire scene had cooled down and investigators were finally able to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. According to Denton James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office, new remains were discovered that changed the direction of the case. Police found a piece of skull with a bullet hole. At that point, we all realized that there was actually a homicide. This was not an accidental fire, reported the sheriff. The remains were collected and sent for forensic DNA testing. In the first set of remains, the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull with the bullet hole, judging by its size, belonged to a child. The version of fatal accident dropped by itself. The version of murder came to the forefront. No one now doubted that the fire was a means of destroying the traces of the crime. It remained to find out under what circumstances the crime had taken place. Was it a burglary that had gone wrong? Or had the family taken their lives deliberately? But then by whom and why? Or could the crime be related to Buchanan Construction, a company where Adam Buchanan was president and chief operating officer, and someone harbored a grudge against him due to a working relationship? Initially, investigators focused specifically on the latter theory. They also looked into Molly's life to determine if she had any enemies capable of the crime. Once those lines of inquiry stalled, officers turned their attention to problems in Molly and Adam's marriage. There proved to be plenty of them. Investigators learned that over time, Molly and Adam's relationship began to deteriorate, and at the time of the crime, they had been sleeping apart for quite some time. A diary was found in which Molly described abuse from Adam. Witnesses interviewed described rough treatment and abuse. According to them, Adam was rude not only to Molly but also to the children. Molly's mother, Susie Slankard, admitted to investigators, "There were times when I was afraid they would kill each other in one of their arguments." Molly did not sever her relationship with Adam, but would periodically take her son and leave to go to her parents' house and return a few days later until the next fight. It also turned out that the couple liked to hunt in the area where their country house was located. Since everyone was armed, the investigators assumed that during another quarrel, one of the spouses grabbed a gun and shot. And when he realized what he had done, he took his own life. However, there was an inconsistency. If the tragedy happened because of a conflict between husband and wife, it means that near the remains of one of them must necessarily be the instrument of crime, which, however, was not. Investigators speculated that the weapon may have been damaged in the fire and may not have looked as obvious as expected. Over the course of 5 days, forensic team members took turns removing ashes from the home. The search was conducted with surgical thoroughness but did not yield the expected result. No weapons were found in the house. By this time came the data of forensic examination. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds before the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the version that someone took their own life. The lack of firearms meant that someone else was in the house, a 4th person who shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start over. Police had no choice but to turn to the 16-year-old son of the deceased. Nolan told officers that the family drove away in an old Dodge truck. According to the son, his father decided to use the company vehicle rather than his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway because he had loaded the truck and trailer with rocks that he was going to decorate the area near his country cabin. It was this truck that police found near the burn structure. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, the young man, as in the first interview, said that he had a duty to look after the house and garden during the absence of his father and stepmother. Nolan also said that they had a neighbor growing forbidden grass on the edge of the Buchanan property, which caused his father to have frequent arguments with this neighbor, demanding that he stop planting the grass and threatening to go to the police. Talking about the family business, Nolan told of the company's financial difficulties. Things were not going well. The company was undergoing downsizing, and the number of employees was down to 5. From what his father said, the debts associated with the business were increasing rapidly. So now the investigation had a lot of useful information, and the detectives had a suspect, a neighbor, especially since in that area, violent crime was often linked to the cultivation of illegal herbs. Detectives felt that the threat of going to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. The problem was no one had any idea which neighbor they were talking about. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing all the homeowners in a row. The tactic was successful. They found a man who confirmed the story of a quarrel with Adam over growing a forbidden crop. But according to him, after a sharp conversation, the conflict was over. The neighbor had an alibi and another version turned out to be untenable. What remained to be dealt with was the financial crisis that had hit the family's business. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and interviewed the employees. Nolan's words were true. The company was in a sorry state. It was threatened with bankruptcy as the amount of debts exceeded $30,000. Because of this, some employees were fired. It turned out that some of the former employees were extremely dissatisfied with the reduction and therefore could be involved in the crime, and that's where investigators got lucky. Over the weekend, the local high school organized a community cleanup day. The students were clearing debris from a business park just a mile from Adam's construction company. It was there on September 19th that a small purse with a wallet and identification cards belonging to Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan was found under one of the bushes. A .22 caliber rifle was lying nearby. Detectives immediately went to the scene of the discovery. The county sheriff's office made a new assumption. The perpetrator had massacred the Buchanan family with the found rifle and, covering his tracks, had taken their documents from the crime scene. The discovery was important because it meant that someone had traveled all the way to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the bag and murder weapon. It appeared to be a Bonita resident. The proximity of the evidence found to the location of Buchanan Construction strengthened the theory that the boss was massacred by one of the disgruntled employees. Detectives sent the firearm and the bag of documents for examination, requesting a warrant to inspect the company's records and premises. Here, the investigators got lucky a second time. During the search, they gained access to a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises. By happy coincidence, the lens of the camera was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. After this discovery, the case was just days away from being solved. Since it was already known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had told them. Detectives realized that the young man had deliberately manipulated the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators re-interviewed Nolan, trying to keep him safe while getting as many details as possible. Nolan again recounted his weekend, where he had been and who he had seen. Only this time they asked him what movie they had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for the shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. The unsuspecting Nolan answered with his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search Buchanan's home in Bonita, search the vehicles, and check financial records. The Ford automobile was still parked in the driveway. It was closely inspected, and they noticed reddish soil sticking to the wheels, similar to that in Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip last weekend or earlier, traces of soil might have remained, but they would not have been as obvious. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed the wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Detectives tracked the bank card payments and found that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th at fast food chain Taco Bell on his way to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he stayed home, did not go with his parents, and had the credit card in his possession. Detectives went to the diner and checked the security cameras. They saw exactly what they expected, a white Ford instead of a truck. When detectives searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that included not 3, but 4 drinks. Evidence collected at the scene of the fire similarly pointed to 4 drink cups, so Nolan was in the car. The next credit card transaction took place on Saturday, September 12th at the Valencia Club Bar in Penryn, about 30 minutes away from the cabin. Adam's parents had previously told detectives about the bar. They said their son and daughter-in-law liked to drop in there after renovations to the cabin. Security cameras recorded the time the couple left the bar, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track the couple's route. A Ford F-150 headed toward the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and at 3:30 a.m., drove in the opposite direction. In the first instance, the camera captured Adam and Molly in the vehicle, and in the second, only Nolan. A few hours later, on Sunday morning, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to pay at 3 of Benita's establishments, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to investigators that Buchanan had only 1 bank card. The facts contradicted Nolan's stories. By this time, forensic results had come back. Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested right in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. He attempted to distort the story and claimed that it was his father who shot the family, after which he pointed a rifle at him and he, defending himself, took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan insisted it was self-defense, attributing the fire and subsequent lie to a state of panic and extreme fright. That's why he took gasoline and set the house on fire to make it look like nothing had happened there. The defense continually focused the jury's attention on Adam's abuse of his own son and other family members. The medical examiner questioned the verdict because the bullet wound mark on a piece of Gavin's skull was consistent with a shot fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed that his and his brother's beds were next to each other and they were simultaneously awakened by the noise and screaming. It was at the moment of awakening that Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at him, and Nolan miraculously managed to push the attacker away. Under this scenario, the shot would have been fired at about a 45-degree angle, which was inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution came to believe that Nolan shot his brother when they were alone in the house while their parents spent time at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. Judging by where the bodies were found, Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. Then he went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, creating an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury found Nolan guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Judge Kingsbury, in announcing the sentence, reflected on the verbal and physical abuse Nolan faced, on the testimony that Nolan massacred his brother because he didn't want him to go through the same horror or be forced to live with what his father had already managed to do to him. But as she did, she also listed facts about the premeditation of the crime and subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and the plans to run the family business that Nolan had voiced to family members. The judge cited a failure to follow rules and deviant behavior noted by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where Nolan went after his arrest. "Everyone has the opportunity to change," Judge Kingsbury told Nolan. "I hope you will do everything in your power to do so. If you behave well, you will have a chance to get out on parole in 25 years under the Senate bill and Supreme Court rulings. It's up to you whether you take that chance or not." Nolan continues to insist he is innocent. If he ever gets out on parole, he will have to pay a huge compensation to the victims. The amount of the payout is unknown at this time. Take a look at this photo. It shows Rexford Lynn Keel Jr., better known as Lynn Keel, and his wife Elizabeth Bess Edwards Keel. They were married for over 20 years. In 2005, Lynn worked as a truck driver, and Elizabeth was an employee of Microbach Laboratories. Probably many of us have pictures that, when we look at them, we realize that shortly after the picture was taken, the lives of the people depicted in it changed dramatically. These words can be fully applied to this one as well. Lynn and Elizabeth lived in this house, which is located in Nash County, North Carolina. As you can see on the map, the place is quite secluded. As 2005 drew to a close, Lynn and Elizabeth, like many people, were making plans for the next year. But on January 1st, 2006, trouble came to their house. It was cold, and the steps outside the house were covered in ice. As Elizabeth was leaving the house, she slipped and fell, hitting her head hard on the corner of the concrete steps. The injuries she sustained was fatal. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy concluded that Elizabeth had died from a blunt force trauma to the head, and her death was ruled an accident. For her husband, relatives, colleagues, and friends, Elizabeth's sudden death was a great shock. She was only 42 years old. About 1 year passed and Lynn Keel decided to move on. He was no longer a truck driver, but worked in real estate. In 2007, he visited Latin America in a work-related visit. On that trip, Lynn, who was 45 years old at the time, met Diana, who was 19 years his junior. Diana was from Bogota, Colombia. She was strikingly beautiful, kind, and a single mom with a daughter. The relationship between them quickly developed, and with her thoughts of the American dream, Diana moved to the United States. She and Lynn began living in his home in Nash County, where about a year earlier, his wife Elizabeth Keel had died in an accident. It wasn't long before Diana and Lynn were married, and a short time later, the couple had a son named Max. In 2017, Diana graduated from Nash Community College. That same year, she began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center. The first few years of their life together were nothing special, but over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. Diana told her close friend that Lynn was an overbearing man who spoke sharply to her and very often verbally abused her. The atmosphere in the house was almost always very tense. Lynn would not allow Diana to be alone with anyone for long periods of time. She began to think about divorce, but she was afraid of her husband because he threatened her. He manipulated her with the baby. He threatened her and told her that if she left him, he would deport her and that she would never see her son again. Diana put up with it all because her children came first for her, but everyone's patience comes to an end sooner or later. In 2019, Diana's daughter Laura was 18, a graduate of Southern Nash High School and a freshman at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and 10-year-old Max was living with his parents. As I said, Diana worked as a nurse at Wilson Medical Center. She was loved and respected by patients and colleagues alike. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received a message in which Diana wrote, "Mom, I love you very much." The message came completely out of the blue. Esperanza knew her daughter didn't have a happy marriage and that she wanted to divorce her husband but was afraid of him. It was only 3 days after that, and Diana's daughter, Laura, sounded the alarm. On March 10th, she tweeted out a plea for help to find her mother. The message said, "This is insane. You see this happen to everyone else, and you don't think it's ever going to happen to you guys. My mom is missing. If you see or hear anything, please let me know. And please retweet this. Help me get the word out. Thank you." That same day, Laura called the medical center where her mother worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had spoken to her in the past 2 days. An employee of the medical center called the police and asked for a welfare check on Diana. A co-worker told the dispatcher that Diana hadn't been heard from in 2 days. She was supposed to work tonight. "She's on the schedule," the Wilson Medical Center nurse said. "She's the type of co-worker. She's always like 30 minutes early. And if you text her, she replies back like reasonably. She has not done any of them." The woman said it was out of character for Diana and asked the sheriff's office to perform a welfare check. Diana was a devoted mother who was in touch with her family every day. She checked her social media regularly, but now her messages went unread and her FaceTime calls unanswered. When a police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn was there. It was surprising that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, not him. Lynn told the police officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days earlier on March 8th when she left the house. Her car was still parked outside the house, which also aroused suspicion, so Lynn was called in for questioning. When questioned, Keel, 57, said his wife had gone out to run some errands and hadn't returned. He said she would leave from time to time and wouldn't return for several days. It was a statement that didn't ring true. Without any charges, the man was released. Diana was reported missing and the police began searching for her. Investigators were able to determine that the woman had not used her cell phone or bank cards in the past few days, and that was not a good sign. This house, as I said at the beginning of the video, is in a secluded location, and there are no neighbors to share any important information with the police. Nevertheless, detectives learned that on the morning of March 8th, the couple was seen having a heated argument on their front porch. A courier had delivered a package addressed to Diana that day, and he was the last person to see her, not counting Lynn Keel, of course. After the police interviewed Diana's co-workers, who told them that she was having problems with her husband, there was no doubt that she would not abandon her son and run away. The only thing that stopped her from divorcing was the fear of losing custody of her 10-year-old son. Everyone the detective spoke to named only one person they thought might have been involved in Diana's disappearance. That person was her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, an ominous discovery was made. 2 years before Diana went missing, Lynn had insured her life for more than $1 million, and he was the sole beneficiary of this insurance. In 2008, sheriff's deputies responded to a domestic dispute in the house, although no further action was taken. Only 2 days had passed since the investigation began, and the police received a disturbing call. During the emergency call, a man later identified as an employee of the North Carolina Department of Transportation said, "He found something on Pokes Hole Road. It looks like something is laying in the woods," he said. "I don't know what it is. A body, a something, I don't know. How far down is it?" The dispatcher asked. "Right here at the end," the caller said. "I will be waiting right here." Unfortunately, what the man who called the police saw was Diana's body, which from the looks of it had been there since the day she disappeared. It turned out that the worker was checking an illegal dump when he saw something suspicious. Pokes Hole Road is a dead-end street leading to farmland, and the fact that the body was found was fortunate, if fortunate is the right word under the circumstances. Who knows how long it would have taken the police to find Diana's body, for it was 30 miles away from her home. I've heard nobody that knew her had anything negative to say about this woman. Nash County Sheriff Keith Stone said, "What a tragic event. Even more tragic, we now have a 10-year-old without a mom." Stone added, "It's very difficult, especially when I see life as it is and how fragile it is. And now we have a kid without a mother. It's very difficult. We have a lot of unanswered questions. That's the reason we, as the Nash County Sheriff's Office, operate with compassion, honor, and diligence. Although it remains unclear how the woman died, there is definitely foul play involved." The police had only one suspect, Lynn Keel. When he was informed that his wife had been found dead, he was very surprised. He was brought to the station for questioning, where he answered to investigators. He claimed as before that Diana had often gone away for several days, but that she had always returned. These words were inconsistent with what Diana's colleagues, relatives, and friends had said. Everyone knew that Lynn Keel controlled his wife's every move. He even forbade her to see her friends. After the interrogation, the man was released because the results of the autopsy had not yet been obtained. 2 days after the discovery of the body, authorities officially confirmed that the body was that of Diana Alejandra Keel. Her death was a painful blow to her children, family, and friends. Diana's daughter Laura created a GoFundMe page to help cover the funeral costs. "My priorities now are to make sure my mother is laid to rest in a manner much more fitting than her death, and to make sure my brother continues to feel the love that our mother shared with us daily," she wrote. "By doing so, I hope to honor my mother's legacy." Diana's cousin living in Colombia told reporters that the mother of two came to North Carolina to live the American dream, but it ended up being a nightmare. "I can't believe it," said Javier Guevara. "I can't believe it. It's very, very sad." After the medical examiner's report was obtained, the frightening details of Diana's death became known. She had extensive skull fractures as well as multiple sharp injuries on the left side of her face and neck. Some of the injuries were post-mortem, which could mean that the person who inflicted them had a personal grudge against Diana. By the time police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, he had gone on the run. He was put on a nationwide wanted list, and a report stated that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and warned that he might be dangerous. It was learned that after Lynn Keel left the police station after being questioned, he drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and fled. According to a warrant to search the home Diana and Lynn Keel shared, authorities seized a variety of firearms including rifles, pistols, and revolvers. Also seized were swords, a machete, and several knives. Warrants show that authorities found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana Keel's 18-year-old daughter inside a Dodge Ram Lynn Keel owned. When the sheriff was asked about their contents, he replied that he did not feel comfortable divulging what was written on those pages. Meanwhile, the search for Lynn Keel continued. It was determined that he had left the state, but his whereabouts were unknown. Stone said the sheriff's office had received calls from Texas and Florida about Keel's truck, but no additional details about his capture were confirmed. He asked the public to drive by local motels and hotels and see if they would notice a pickup truck with the license plate number listed on the information sheet distributed. "We have no idea where he might be," he said. "This is an opportunity for the public to help because this person is dangerous." On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was discovered, Lynn Keel was seized by Arizona State Police 34 miles from the U.S. border with Mexico. He was in possession of a large sum of cash and a large quantity of various canned goods. He was allegedly planning to cross the border and escape into Mexican territory. After his arrest, Lynn Keel was airlifted to Ashe County where he was charged in connection with the death of his wife, Diana. Experts believed she was still alive when she was loaded into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left for dead. Lynn Keel was therefore also charged with kidnapping. When searching the house, forensic investigators found overwhelming evidence that the attack on Diana took place in the bedroom. According to the prosecutor, after taking Diana to a remote area, Keel went to a local Walmart where he bought cleaning supplies with which he tried to cover up evidence of the crime. After he was arrested, Diana's daughter, Laura, wrote the following words on her Facebook account. "I know everyone has a certain feeling towards what my stepdad did to my family. However, I beg all of you not to spread hate. My brother has such a pure heart that he doesn't need to see that hate. We all need to focus on how wonderful my mother was to heal us as best we can." The brutal nature of the crime and Keel's subsequent flight from justice drew local, state, and national media attention to the case. The media attention caused the public defender at the time to ask for a change in venue so that a jury pool could be selected. Media coverage included, among other things, press conferences by the Ashe County Sheriff, many written articles in local newspapers, online articles, television coverage, as well as social media discussion. Discussion in the media included speculations surrounding the passing of the defendant's previous wife, the motion stated. The state objected to the motion, but did note that the state had concerns over efficiency and a waste of resources and time should a trial begin in Ashe County, and then be required to be transferred to another venue after the trial process begins in Ashe County, the motion stated. In the end, Ashe County Superior Court Judge Quinton Sumner decided to move the venue to Pitt County. In the document outlining his decision, Sumner stated that there exists in Ashe County a prejudice against this defendant, so that he cannot obtain a fair and impartial trial within Ashe County. In October 2021, Rexford Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges against him to avoid a lengthy trial. A no contest plea similar to a guilty plea means that the defendant accepts responsibility for the charge. Keel pled to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense attorneys asked that the judge takes into account that he has been experiencing kidney failure and has been incarcerated for the past 2 years. But at sentencing, Diana's mother reminded the court of the reason her daughter was no longer alive. She said she wanted to tell women that if their partner was abusive, They needed to run. "Don't stay there," she begged as she asked the judge for a severe sentence. "I want you to have the same compassion for Keel that he had when he killed her." Diana's cousin released the following statement. "From all of Diana Alejandra Keel's family, we want to extend a huge thank you to all law enforcement involved in apprehending and bringing Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder, to face justice. I want to express the immense gratitude our family has felt, including the true empathy from the Mass County Sheriff's Office, along with so many heartfelt messages of support and love since this nightmare began. We know Diana Alejandra has been seen by the public for the amazing mother, daughter, sister, cousin, friend, and co-worker that she was. She loved her 2 children more than I can ever express. Everything she did was for them. She brought joy into this world with her contagious laugh, bright smile, and huge heart for others, including animals. To all that knew her and those that would have liked to have known her, please think of her and her children only with the kindest thoughts and positive energy possible. Thank you so much for your continued support." Lynn Keel did not say what the motive for the crime was. Perhaps he learned that Diana was meeting with a lawyer and wanted to begin divorce proceedings. We should also not forget the insurance policy worth more than $1 million under the plea agreement. Lynn Keel was sentenced to between 32 and 41 years in prison. But that's not all. Police had questions relating to the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth. Was her death really an accident? Her family said they always had questions about her death. In a statement, Elizabeth Keel's family said they have always questioned Bess's death and feel deeply saddened that another life has now been taken. "We're going to work all the leads on that, and we're going to go back and look at the information we had on the first incident reports," Stone said. "We're going to talk with the district attorney's office. It's something that we need to be looking at." Elizabeth Keel is buried in a family plot in Spring Hope. Stone said right now he is working with a pathologist and going over all of the evidence, who said there is a strong possibility they will exhume Elizabeth Keel's body. Dr. John Butts was the chief medical examiner in North Carolina for 24 years. One would only go to exhume a body if there was some question that wasn't addressed at the time that could be addressed by re-examining the remains. Butts said, according to him, there have been many cases in his career where a death deemed accidental turned out to be murder. Someone falls off of something and was killed, and then additional information turns out that they didn't fall. They were pushed, and there would be no difference in examination. We'd have the same findings, but of course now the circumstances leading up to why it happened have changed. But said, no new information related to the death of Elizabeth Keel has appeared over the past 2 years. We can assume that authorities have found no reason to reopen the investigation and exhume the body, but it is possible that we will hear more about this case in the future. Peggy Cox was a devoted mother and a woman of strong faith. She met her husband through a church group, and together they became proud parents to 2 daughters and a son. In 1973, tragedy struck when her husband was severely injured in a car accident, leaving him in a vegetative state. 4 years later, in 1977, Peggy decided to relocate her family from their home in South Nashville to Thompson Station, Tennessee, to be closer to relatives. Throughout her life, she remained deeply involved in her children's upbringing, teaching them how to swim and ensuring they felt safe and comfortable confiding in her about anything. She did also have to rely on her own parents for help with her children so that she could also care for her husband until he passed away in 1983. The stresses of providing such intensive care for her husband while also raising their children without him sometimes wore on Peggy, but she relied on her family, her church, and her love of reading to cope with them. She attended 8:30 a.m. Mass at St. Philip's Catholic Church every Sunday and could read an entire romance novel in one day. In 1987, Peggy began working at a Hardee's restaurant in Franklin, Tennessee. For a while, she worked there with both her son Jude and her daughter Desiree. Desiree ended up leaving to go work at a local Kmart, but Jude continued working at the Hardee's as a cook. Friends of all 3 of Peggy's children would often go through the drive-thru of the restaurant just to say hello to Peggy while she was working because they were so fond of her. On February 1st, 1991, Peggy and Jude were both working at the Hardee's. Peggy was taking orders at the drive-thru and 20-year-old Jude was cooking just a few feet away from her. At approximately 11:45 p.m., a man ordered a roast beef combo at the drive-thru. Jude began preparing the order as the man drove around to the drive-thru window. Suddenly, Jude heard 2 gunshots. He instinctively dropped to the floor. When he looked over towards the drive-thru window, he saw his mother stumble backwards and fall to the floor. One of the bullets, which had come from a small caliber handgun, had struck her in the neck and entered her brainstem. She was rushed to Williamson Medical Center, but did not survive. Peggy had been murdered on her 49th birthday. Peggy was beloved by those who knew her, and police could not find anyone with a motive to harm her. The main theory they identified was that Peggy was killed in a botched robbery. According to Jude, his mother's killer would not have had enough time from when he placed his order to when the gunshots were fired to both drive around to the window and demand the money. It is possible that the assailant panicked when he arrived at the window and fired immediately without first robbing the restaurant. Several witnesses reported seeing a compact car speeding away from the Hardys and getting onto Interstate 65 around the time of the murder. These sightings were the main clue in the case, but the car was never located, and Peggy's case soon went cold. In 2011, 20 years after Peggy was killed, Franklin Police Department Detective Darren Barnes requested to take over the case. Because of his position on an FBI task force at the time, he was able to utilize some of their resources in his investigation. In 2013, he was also able to present Peggy's case to the Vidic Society. The society, which only reviews a handful of cases each year, is a group of forensic experts and investigators from a variety of disciplines that provides confidential consultations about cold cases to members of law enforcement. Despite these efforts and the efforts of Peggy's children to keep her story in the local media, the case has still not been closed. The population of Franklin, Tennessee has quadrupled since Peggy died, but her murder remains the city's only unsolved homicide. A $25,000 reward is being offered in the case. 46-year-old Rizwan Danani lived in Washington State, where he owned several businesses and restaurants. He was working at one of these restaurants, a Dairy Queen in Auburn, Washington, on March 31, 2016. He arrived at the restaurant around 7 p.m. with plans to be there until 11 p.m. Instead of leaving at that time, he called his family at it instead. He told them that he would need to continue working for a few more hours before returning to his home in an unincorporated area of King County outside of Redmond, Washington. Surveillance footage shows Rizwan leaving the restaurant alone and on his own accord around 2 a.m. He has not been seen or heard from since. Rizwan had not been driving his usual vehicle that night, and the vehicle he had used to drive to the Dairy Queen was left behind in the parking lot of the restaurant. Rizwan's wallet, with all of his known forms of identification still inside of it, was found inside of the car. Rizwan either left on foot or got into an unknown vehicle. When he disappeared, he was also without his jacket and cell phone. 25 hours before went missing, there had been a fire at another one of his restaurants, the Celtic Bayou, on West Lake Sammamish Parkway northeast in Redmond. At 1 a.m. on March 31st, someone working at a nearby business heard an explosion and called 911. Redmond firefighters were able to quickly control the fire, which had not spread to any neighboring businesses in part due to the restaurant's sprinkler system. There was extensive damage to the restaurant, but no one was injured in the fire. Police suspected that the fire was caused by arson, and the witness who had called 911 also reported seeing an unknown man walking away from the restaurant just after the explosion that started the fire. The authorities arrived at Rizwan's home at 5 a.m. that morning to inform him of the fire and to interview him. Rizwan had also gone into the Redmond police station to provide them with more information later in the day. Police do not consider Rizwan a suspect in the arson. They are concerned about his well-being and believe that his disappearance may be related to information he may have about the fire. He remains missing. Nancy Theobald was witty, clever, independent, and accomplished. At Indian Hill High School in Cincinnati, she was a member of the National Honor Society. She received a scholarship to study in France as an American Field Service exchange student during her senior year. She was accepted into the honors program at the University of Cincinnati and began her studies there in the fall of 1977 with plans to major in finance. Nancy's father, Dr. Jerry Theobald, had been a veterinarian at the Cincinnati Zoo, but decided to open a veterinary clinic in Florida. He, his wife, and youngest children made the move to Pompano Beach, Florida, but Nancy and her two older siblings decided to remain in Ohio. The three siblings lived together in an apartment on Deccabock Street in the Clifton neighborhood of north central Cincinnati. In addition to attending school full-time, 18-year-old Nancy found a part-time job working at an Arby's restaurant that was less than 2 miles from where she lived. She began working there in October of 1977, and her supervisor immediately noticed that she was a conscientious worker who was always nice to everyone. Nancy was last seen at the Arby's on November 16, 1977, when she was working a late shift. She did not normally walk home after her night shifts, usually calling her brother Michael or a friend for a ride. On this night, however, she walked home. Michael would later report that he had left their apartment around the time Nancy got off of work, so he may have just missed a call from her asking for a ride. It has never been confirmed if Nancy did in fact call home or any of her friends asking for a ride. Whether by choice or by necessity, because she could not find someone to pick her up, Nancy left the Arby's at 10:50 p.m. to walk home. She never arrived. Nancy's family knew that something was wrong as soon as she disappeared. According to her family, Nancy was simply too dedicated to her education and family to simply walk away from all of her responsibilities, and she had nothing to run away from. She also did not have a driver's license or a car. When she left the Arby's that night, it is believed that she only had $10 in her work uniform with her. Nancy remained missing for almost 6 weeks. On December 27th, a farmer discovered her body frozen into the mud in a creek bed on his property near Westchester in Butler County, north of Cincinnati. She was partially nude. A rope was around her neck and her hands were bound behind her back. Her autopsy would reveal that she had died of strangulation and had been sexually assaulted. Nancy's case went cold for decades. In 2000, the Butler County Sheriff's Office announced that they would be reopening 4 cold cases. One of these cases was Nancy's. Sheriff Harold Gabbard also announced that he believed that Nancy had been killed by the same person who had committed 2 of the other murders being reopened. 22-year-old Tammy King was a mother of a 4-year-old son, Michael. She went missing on October 25, 1982, while she was 5 months pregnant with her second child. Her body was discovered in Riley Township, Ohio on November 13. 24-year-old Victoria Hinsier was reported missing by her roommate a few days after she failed to show up for her shift as a waitress at a Red Lobster restaurant on October 20, 1976. Her body was found in a wooded area in Ross Township, Ohio by a man walking his dog on October 31st. All 3 women were attractive brunettes from Cincinnati. They had all been sexually assaulted and strangled before being left, either nude or partially clothed, in remote areas in southern Butler County. They were killed in different years, but at the same time of year, between the end of October and the middle of November. They had all recently been working in the food service industry. Victoria and Nancy were both still employed at restaurants, and Tammy had recently worked at one. The sheriff's office had a suspect they believed to be connected, although they did not publicly identify him, beyond revealing that he was an inmate at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution. Investigators went there to interview him, but he did not wish to cooperate. This suspect was not the only lead the sheriff's office was following. They also hoped that the more advanced technology that was now available to them could provide them with a suspect. Hair and fiber samples were submitted to a lab for analysis, but the effort did not solve any of the 3 cases. Nancy's family has remained dedicated to finally resolving her case, even after decades without answers. Nancy's brother Joseph, who was just 11 years old at the time of her death, kept his sister's memory alive in part by naming his youngest daughter after her. He lives in Florida, where he works as an insurance investigator. He has also been investigating Nancy's murderer. While looking at Nancy's autopsy report, he noted that blood that may have belonged to her killer was found on her sweater. When he asked the authorities in Butler County about the blood in 2019, he was told that it had recently been resubmitted to the lab for new DNA testing. So far, this testing has not located a match to the DNA. If the contributor of the DNA can ever be identified, however, it may be the break in the case that will finally close it. This is a story of survival that is difficult to fully capture in words. The courage of 8-year-old Jennifer Schutt is immeasurable, and her actions in life-threatening circumstances are extraordinary. In a rare twist, the victim herself played a key role in capturing her attacker. Despite suffering a severe injury that left her unable to speak, Jennifer survived, holding on to every detail of the horrific ordeal. Over the course of 19 years, she relentlessly pursued justice, and in the end, she succeeded. Jennifer Schutt, an 8-year-old schoolgirl, had just finished her day at school. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who did everything in her power to ensure Jennifer's happiness and well-being. Elaine worked multiple jobs to support their family and provide her daughter with a joyful childhood. Surrounded by so much love and care, Jennifer flourished into a vibrant and cheerful child, eager to learn and showing great intelligence and curiosity. Like many children her age, Jennifer was often afraid of the dark, a fear that was no different from any other child's. She had a fear of the dark and frequently slept alongside her mother in the same room. That night on August 9, 2009, the mother and daughter slept in the same room. Jennifer was tossing and turning, kicking her mom in sleep, making it difficult for her to fall asleep. Unusually, at 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to go back to her own room for the rest of the night because she needed to get up early for work. Understandingly, Jennifer responded to her mother saying, "Just because I love you, Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went to her room. Elaine would later regret this decision for a long time, but at that moment, she couldn't know what would happen next. The following morning, Elaine discovered that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She noticed that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine promptly called 911. Upon the police's arrival, she recounted that she hadn't heard any noise or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It is worth mentioning that their apartment was on the first floor, and the windows in Jennifer's room overlooked the parking lot, leading Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment was not the ideal living situation for her and her young daughter, but it was the best they could afford at the time. Nevertheless, Elaine's parents decided to help her and their granddaughter with a new place to live. They purchased a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother were supposed to move there in a few months, and they had been there the day before Jennifer went missing. They were working in the garden where Jennifer was bitten by mosquitoes, which prevented her from sleeping peacefully that night. After her daughter's disappearance, Elaine was devastated. She said that Jennifer was all she had and pleaded for her return. The police worked tirelessly to locate her. Luckily, Elaine didn't have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and accidentally stumbled upon something. To their horror, they realized it was the body of a young girl. Upon arriving at the scene, the police found the body of 8-year-old Jennifer Schutt lying in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was grave, but she was still breathing. Jennifer's condition was grave. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear. The main life-threatening injury for Jennifer was a wide wound on her throat, which caused her to lose a lot of blood and made her extremely pale and weak. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition where doctors fought to save her life. Fortunately, after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to reassure her daughter, explaining that all these people were there to care for her and help her. However, Jennifer didn't trust anyone. Her behavior became more understandable when she finally revealed what had happened to her that night. Jennifer could not directly inform the investigator of anything. To obtain any information, the detectives gave her a notebook and several pens asking her to answer questions in writing. Due to her fear of men, Jennifer wrote notes to her mother, who then passed them to the officer. Jennifer's responses were surprisingly precise, detailing the events accurately. Despite being only 8 years old, She displayed remarkable intelligence for her age. She started by going into her room, turning on the light, and picking up a book to read, hoping it would help her sleep, which it did. Jennifer fell asleep. The next thing she knew, a stranger was carrying her out of the house. Afterward, he placed Jennifer in the car claiming to be an undercover police officer. She later confessed that she immediately felt that something was wrong. As they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer told the stranger that he could drop her off at their house, to which he replied, "I can't because they're not home." And then she realized he was lying because their car was in the driveway. Later, the man stopped near Jennifer's school, about 3 kilometers from her home. He then said to watch the moon carefully. When it changed color, her mother would come for her. 5 minutes passed and the stranger said, "Well, your mom's not coming, so we need to go further." They drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street where the strangers stopped the car. Jennifer tried once again to make sure he was a real policeman. Jennifer turned around to search for it, and at that moment, the suspicious policeman took off her underwear. Jennifer is unsure of how long she was in the stranger's grip because she blacked out. She first regained consciousness when he was dragging her through the field by her ankles. Despite the excruciating pain from twigs and stones digging into her back, Jennifer pretended to be dead and stayed silent. Realizing this was her chance to survive. He let go of her feet and left her in the field. Jennifer only heard him walking away. Then she heard his car door slam and him drive away. Since the exact time of Jennifer's disappearance is unknown, it is believed that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. When the sun set, she saw the lights of passing cars. Nearby, she heard children's voices, and a dog approached her several times as if trying to get the attention of its owner, but he never came. Throughout, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious. Jennifer said she wasn't afraid and had even accepted that she might not survive. But suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and at that moment, something hit her leg. This story was very challenging for young Jennifer as she couldn't speak and had to write everything down on paper. Moreover, her fear of men complicated the situation. So her mother asked all the questions, and Jennifer's answers were relayed to the officers who were behind the door. Incredibly, 8-year-old Jennifer even managed to get the stranger's name from him. For days after her disappearance, the police requested the services of forensic artist Lois Gibson, who communicated with Jennifer solely through gestures and notes. Despite these challenges, they managed to create an incredibly detailed composite sketch. It was shown to the public in hopes that someone would identify the man. Meanwhile, the police continued to comb through the crime scene and found Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Although there was hope that DNA on the clothing would lead to the perpetrator, no matches were found. Jennifer's recovery was gradual. She showed remarkable resilience despite still being a child. There was a moment when she got upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and a faint sound escaped her mouth. Doctors were shocked because her vocal cords were almost severed, and they never expected them to heal. But somehow they began to mend. Soon after, Jennifer was discharged from the hospital. She not only returned home, but also went back to school. After completing her schooling and college education, Jennifer decided to pursue a career as a children's librarian. However, she never forgot what happened that night. Each day felt like a hunt for the criminal. Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan, and for the first time in many years, she trusted a man and they fell in love. However, at the same time, the trail of her attacker grew colder. The chances of him being found were slim, and the case showed no progress despite being passed from one investigator to another. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. Tim decided to bring in FBI Special Agent Richard Renison to the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas police before joining the FBI. Tim and Richard discovered the significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and immediately after she was found, with Jennifer's underwear being particularly crucial as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in 19 years, They understood that the case's age meant it would not be a priority in the lab. Despite a whole year passing, their work was rewarded. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same man Jennifer had written down many years ago. It turned out that the 8-year-old girl had been incredibly accurate in her descriptions, and his DNA was logged into the national database following an assault on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. On February 4, 2000, Dennis was conditionally released. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for driving under the influence less than half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison investigated the link between the suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and the small town of Dickinson, Texas. It turned out that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To confirm his identity as the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the picture, they were stunned. He looked like a copy of the composite sketch created with the help of 8-year-old Jennifer. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He insisted he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't recall why he had stopped near her apartment, and couldn't comprehend why he had treated her so cruelly. Dennis also revealed an interesting detail that investigators didn't know. After the attack, he was overwhelmed with guilt, and he attempted suicide with a shotgun. Bradford wanted to pull the trigger, but changed his mind. Afterward, he was admitted to the psychiatric ward, which happened to be the same hospital that Jennifer was still in. Even at that time, he was so close to her. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years was arrested. Later, Jennifer Chouette expressed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise. She also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom. Since Bradford was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial, Jennifer was given the opportunity to select a court date. She chose August 10th, 20th anniversary of the attack. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10th, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung himself in his jail cell. Feeling that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away, Jennifer went to Dennis' grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and said, "I wonder if he heard me." At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg. Jennifer took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Despite the horrific events caused by Dennis' actions, Jennifer faced yet another challenge in life. As a result of the trauma caused by Dennis, Jennifer almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, amidst the darkness, there are shining examples of kindness such as Dr. Craig Witz. After hearing Jennifer's story, he generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. At the end of 2012, the couple welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah. It's like Hengshmi, who would have thought they're really my happily. Although the criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She says, "We've gone through something in life that we can talk about, but it's worth sharing it with others to instill hope. I hope this inspires you to use your voice to help someone else," Jennifer added at the end. Lynette White was a beautiful young woman from Cardiff, Wales, who was doing what she believed she had to do in order to get by. She dropped out of school and had been working as a prostitute since she was 14. Being a sex worker wasn't part of Lynette's childhood dream. Weeks before she was found dead, Tim Rogers, a BBC Wales journalist, interviewed her while investigating child prostitution. During the interview, she told Tim how she was drugged, taken to Bristol by a gang of men, and forced into prostitution. Yet, even after Lynette found her way back to Cardiff, she could not find her way out of prostitution. By 1988, Lynette, who was now 20 years old, was working the streets daily as a prostitute. Described as popular and pretty by friends, Lynette was probably the most visible prostitute working in Cardiff at the time. She was the first girl to be out at lunchtime and would be the last to leave at night. Working every day, rain or shine, even on Christmas, earning £100 per night. One would almost think White was working hard to have a better life, but that was not the case. It was all to pay for her boyfriend, Stephen Miller's cocaine addiction. Every night, Miller took £60 to £90 from Lynette, who was his only source of income. Lynette lived with Miller in a flat on Dorset Street in Cardiff. Each day, Miller would drive her to Riverside in Cardiff where she worked, and meet her later in the evening at the North Star Club to collect her earnings. It continued like that every day until February 9, 1988 was the last day Miller saw Lynette. She had not made contact with Miller or her friends in the days leading up to her death, which was very odd behavior for her. She was also due to make an appearance as a witness for 2 prosecution trials when she disappeared. No one knows the reason why White stopped contacting others 5 days prior to her death. The police thought she was deliberately hiding to avoid giving evidence and began to actively search for her. Earlier that same month, Leanne Vilde, Lynette's friend, had loaned Lynette her keys to a flat for the purpose of taking clients there for sex. On February 14, 1988, in the evening, Leanne, who probably wanted to use the flat, went there but found it locked, which was quite unusual. Lynette was nowhere to be found. Leanne became very worried about Lynette. She drove to Buttetown Police Station to report her friend's disappearance. She returned to a James Street flat with 3 policemen who were expecting to serve an arrest warrant on Lynette and take her in. The policemen forced entry into the apartment and found Lynette lying there in a pool of her own blood. A missing witness fell dead with massive injuries. Who murdered Lynette White? According to the autopsy performed by pathologist Bernard Knight, Lynette had been stabbed over 50 times on her chest, face, stomach, wrist, breasts, arms, hands, and inner thighs. Her throat was also savagely slit from ear to ear. Though she was stabbed multiple times, the autopsy revealed that Lynette died from the throat injury. The pathologist also determined that Lynette was murdered on February 14th between 1:45 a.m. and 4 a.m. Lynette's body was found between the foot of the bed and the window, covered in blood. A zoospermic semen, which is semen containing no sperm, was found in her vagina and also under underwear. There were 2 different blood types found on Lynette, her own blood and an AB-type blood, which did not belong to Lynette. Soon the news about Lynette's death had spread and police began to ask questions about the incident. Witnesses told the police that they saw a man looking distressed in the area where Lynette's body was found on James Street. The man looked very suspicious, and he appeared to have blood on his hands. The suspicious man, described as a white male, approximately 5'8" to 5'10", and in his mid-30s became the primary focus of the investigation. Efforts to find this man were exhaustive. Miller was questioned but later released because his blood type didn't match the one found on Lynette. Because Lynette was supposed to appear as a witness against a man named Francine Cordell in court, Francine and his mother were investigated. But soon the 2 were eliminated as suspects because their blood also did not match the AB blood type found on Lynette. Very little is known about the case against Cordell or the other case that Lynette was set to give evidence in. Another suspect that piqued the investigators' interest was a man who was on a list of 12 persons of interest in the area due to their past criminal activity. He was a sex offender and a pedophile who lived close to James Street. His identity was concealed and he was called Mr. X. When Mr. X was interviewed, he admitted to paying Lynette for sex in the past and was unable to account for his whereabouts at the time of the murder. Mr. X had blood type AB, which prompted the police to run a DNA test on him. When the results came back, it eliminated Mr. X from the investigation. Now, all that the police were left with were statements gathered from their door-to-door inquiry. Gromick, who lived in the flat right above where Lynette was murdered, together with his friend Atkins, gave statements implicating each other in their accounts. But as the statements contained 4 completely different accounts, the investigators didn't take it seriously. Ronnie Williams, a police informant, also gave an account implicating his common-law brother-in-law, Youssef Abdullahi. He initially claimed Abdullahi knew the killer and later implicated him, directly saying Abdullahi was the killer. It was known to the police that the 2 detested each other, so again, investigators dismissed the account. Leanne Vilde, who reported Lynette's disappearance on the day she died, was also suspected and questioned. The police visited her daily to question her. The pressure was becoming too much for her to handle, and one day while she was drunk, she named Miller and Abdullahi as the killers. Violet Parayam, a secretary at the Cardiff Yacht Club, also gave a statement about the incident. 8 months into the investigation, she came forward claiming that on February 14th, while driving home from the club at about 1:30 a.m., she saw 4 excited black males outside the building where Lynette was killed. She then identified 2 of them as John Akhti and Rashid Omar. Piriam's statement would give the case a new direction. Angela Sala, who is mildly mentally retarded, also gave a statement that she saw Miller, John Rashid, Ronnie Acton, John's cousin, Tony Paris, and Tony Brace outside 7 James Street on the day Lynette was murdered. This was exactly what Clyde needed, as her account corroborated Piriam's statement. Further implicating Abdullahi, John, Miller, and the rest were Gromick and Atkins, who gave new statements on the same day with Sala. They said they also saw a group of men, including Ronnie and Abdullahi. Sala then gave another statement in December 1988 that she heard a scream from Lynette's flat and rushed there with Vilde. Coincidentally, on the same day, Vilde also told the police that she went to the flat after she heard Lynette scream and met Miller Abdullahi, Ronnie Akhti, Miller's brother, and an unnamed mixed-race man. Unfortunately for Sala, she had an AB blood type. Police insisted that her blood was found on Lynette's socks. She then gave a new statement that she was part of the killing together with Vilde and the other guys. Vilde also admitted that she was forced to cut Lynette's wrist to ensure her complicity and silence. Miller confessed to killing Lynette after 307 denials. He also implicated the other men maimed, which led to the arrest of all the men allegedly involved in the murder. On December 7, 1988, the police arrested Stephen and Tony Miller, Yusuf Abdullahi, Ronnie Akhti, Rashid Omar, and Martin Tucker. On December 9, 1988, John Akhti and Tony Paris were also arrested. For close to a year, they were locked up until their trial began on October 5, 1989 at Swansea Crown Court. This trial became the longest murder trial in British legal history, lasting 197 days. After spending 2 years in custody, Ronnie and John Akhti were acquitted of the murder, while Tony Paris, Stephen Miller, and Yusuf Abdullahi were found guilty. Each were sentenced to life imprisonment, and since then, they're known as the Cardiff Three. Even though no forensic evidence linked these men to the crime scene, they were held as the criminals. However, there were a lot of doubts and questions about the convictions. Consequently, the friends and families of the Cardiff Three began a campaign to overturn the convictions. The campaign received massive support and was followed by television documentaries in 1992. By December 1992, the Cardiff Three's appeal was heard. After the Court of Appeal had listened to Miller's interrogation, Lord Taylor said the police had bullied Miller during the interview. Therefore, the truthfulness of Miller's submission was irrelevant. The Cardiff Three were free at last. Their convictions were declared unsafe and unsatisfactory by Lord Taylor. But if the Cardiff Three didn't commit the crime, it means the real criminal was still roaming free. It brings us to yet the same question. Who murdered Lynette White? 8 years later, the case was reopened. This time, Professor Dave Barkley and Chief Superintendent Kevin O'Neill were assigned to the task. The case took the officers back to the crime scene. By then, it was already 12 years since the incident happened. While examining the old crime scene photographs, Professor Barkley's eyes caught something that no one else saw in all these years. It was a large drop of blood believed to have been thrown from a knife onto the wallpaper. When the crime was committed in 1988, police removed lots of wallpaper in the flats to be stored as evidence. Upon searching through the old wallpaper evidence, they discovered that the only missing piece of wallpaper was the one that contained the large drop of blood. The forensic scientist didn't give up though. He continued to study the crime scene photos and realized the blood could have dropped on the skirting board beneath. Underneath several layers of paint, the team found the blood completely sealed in and dry. Traces of the blood were also found on a piece of cellophane wrapper from a cigarette pack. Since then, the detectives and scientists dubbed the suspect Cellophane Man. The forensics team led by Angela Gallup got to work, but shockingly, The DNA profile was not found in any of the 140 police databases. But when the police searched for similar profiles, it was narrowed to just 100 in the Cardiff area. Using the approach of familial DNA searching, a partial match was eventually made with the profile of a 14-year-old boy. This boy was known to the police as he was once arrested for joyriding in Cardiff. But could he be the cellophane man? If you thought about his age, then your guess was right. He wasn't even born when the incident happened. At that time, the case was 15 years old. Notwithstanding, the police had to visit his house. When they got there, they were told that the boy's father was dead, but he had an uncle, Jeffrey Gafford. On February 26, 2003, detectives pulled up at Jeffrey's home, a semi-detached house in the village of Langhurin, 15 miles west of Cardiff, but no one was home. The following day, they checked to Jeffrey's place of work, an office block in Cardiff city centre, where he worked as the security guard. When the police explained the reason for their visit, Jeffrey said, "Oh, I thought you got some guys for that." He was asked to provide a mouth swab and he complied. Immediately, police checked the swab. They had finally caught the cellophane man. Chief Superintendent Kevin O'Neill was determined to do things right this time. He put a surveillance team on Jeffrey while he made preparations for the interview. Chief O'Neill had plans to put surveillance on Jeffrey for a whole week, but on February 28, 2003, Jeffrey made a crazy move. The surveillance team spotted him at a garage where he bought 3 packets of paracetamol, an over-the-counter pain reliever. By the time the police got to Jeffrey's house, he had taken about 62 paracetamols. Jeffrey denied ever taking those tablets, but he announced, "Just for the record, I did kill Lynette White. I've been waiting for this for 15 years. Whatever happens, I deserve it. I sincerely hope to die." He was taken to the hospital where he told a staff member that he was being watched because of a murder he committed 15 years ago. Jeffrey was prepared to die as he initially refused to be treated. He eventually agreed to take an antidote. Within a few days, he had recovered. On July 4, 2003, Jeffrey pleaded guilty to Lynette White's murder, and the judge, Justice Royce, sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 12 years 8 months. Jeffrey's barrister said Jeffrey killed Lynette over 30 pounds for sex. He said Jeffrey wanted his money back when he changed his mind. In February 2007, Atkins, Sela, Vilda, and Gromit were charged with perjury. By December 2008, Sela, Vilda, and Gromit were found guilty and sentenced to 18 months of imprisonment each. Atkins was exempted because it was believed that he was threatened, abused, and manipulated to admit to false accounts suggested to him. In March 2009, it was announced that there was enough evidence to prosecute the police officers involved in the initial investigation with conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. In 2011, the trial collapsed due to missing evidence. In 2015, 8 of the 15 charged officers cleared of perverting the course of justice launched a high court civil action against the force, suing for malicious prosecution, false imprisonment, and misfeasance. But at the end of 2015, the judge in the civil action dismissed their case. The 5 falsely accused men were compensated after their release. Stephen Miller was paid £571,000, John Actie was paid £300,000, while Tony Paris was paid £250,000. Roan Actie died in 2007 after much struggle to cope with what had happened to him. Youssef Abdullahi also died in 2011 of perforated cancer. He too had battled with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's it on the Lynette White case. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. In December 2021, the name Harmony Montgomery first hit headlines across the United States of America when a missing persons investigation was launched to find the 7-year-old girl. Since then, her father and stepmother have both been arrested and charged. A home where she used to live in Manchester, New Hampshire, has been searched for days on end, and the reward for information leading to her discovery has topped $141,000. But here's the strange thing. Before all of this, nobody seems to have set eyes on Harmony for more than 2 years. So who is Harmony Montgomery? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice that this little girl has gone missing? Where has she been at all this time? And is it now too late to save her life? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, And today I want to take you guys through the story of little Harmony Montgomery, who dropped off the face of the earth back in 2019. Little Harmony wasn't born under a lucky star. Both her parents have a problematic history of substance abuse, and she had to cope with a visual disability in one eye through all of that. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, a resident of Massachusetts, lost custody due to addiction problems when her daughter was just about 4 years old. Sorey had to surrender Harmony to the state in the summer of 2018. After that, the girl's father, Adam Montgomery, secured sole custody in February 2019 and moved her to New Hampshire. Harmony was living with her father, Adam, as well as his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their children at the property at the time when she went missing. The little girl had been in and out of foster care for much of her life, according to her files. Sometimes kids do get caught up in the legal system for years at a time, but Harmony wasn't one of the kids who slipped through the cracks of the foster care system. She went missing from her own father's house, and he never reported the matter nor tried to reach out for help, nor find his daughter. So what exactly is his involvement in the disappearance of his child? Police said they first became aware of the case when they received a call from the girl's mother, Crystal Sorey, in November 2021. She had been trying to locate her daughter for months, but said she had been blocked by her ex-husband from contacting her. She said she last saw her daughter during a FaceTime video call with Adam Montgomery around Easter 2019. Sorey told the police that since then, she unsuccessfully made attempts to find Harmony by contacting various schools and driving by addresses associated with Adam Montgomery. She said last year, he and his partner Kayla blocked all communication with her. According to news reports, Sorey had been sharing concerns over Harmony's well-being with Blair and Jonathan Miller, a couple who fostered and eventually adopted Harmony's younger brother, Jameson, in June 2019. The two were also actively trying to make a connection with Harmony and told Sorey multiple times they'd adopt her if the need arose. Harmony spent a lot of time in foster care with her younger biological brother, Jameson. It seems that the couple, who said they repeatedly told Harmony's mother that they were willing to adopt the girl if need be, was very much interested in the hunt or the missing child. The couple actively tried to make contact with Harmony throughout the past 2 years, as they said Jameson missed her and that he'd cry at night for her. The couple said they weren't ever able to speak with Harmony and kept in touch with Sorey about her attempts to open a line of communication with the girl's father. On November 18, 2021, Sorey reported Harmony missing to the Manchester Police Department. Sorey made her first public appearance at the Candlelight Vigil on January 8th after authorities searched the last known residence of her daughter. "I just don't feel that in my heart," Sorey told reporters at the time. "Like, I don't feel like I lost her, and a mother knows. A mother knows if your baby's here or not. I know she's here." She had this message for her daughter. "Hi, baby. If you can see me and hear me, I want you to know that I never stop looking for you, and I won't stop fighting until I find you. Okay, you stay strong, and mommy's right here fighting for you. I love you." Now this is where the timeline of events starts to get confusing, and that's typically the point in any investigation when you know someone has been lying. Mrs. Sorey told police she had not been able to contact her daughter since they spoke on a video call in April 2019. After that, she said, Montgomery cut off all contact between her and her daughter. But Montgomery claimed to investigators he last saw his daughter around Thanksgiving 2019, claiming that Mrs. Sorey had picked up her from Manchester to take her to live with her. The criminal complaint says that Montgomery claimed to believe his daughter was living with his ex and did not show much emotion or reaction when officers said they were concerned whether Harmony was alive when they contacted him in December. His story was also contradicted by Kayla Montgomery's account, who said she last saw Harmony the day after Thanksgiving when her husband said he was driving her to see Mrs. Sorey. And in some additional testimony, Adam Montgomery's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, told investigators that he had not seen Harmony or his nephew since late 2019 when she was 5 years old. Police interviews with other family members revealed Montgomery was allegedly abusive toward his daughter, including giving her a black eye, forcing her to clean the toilet with her toothbrush, and making her stand in a corner for hours as punishment. Montgomery's brother, Michael Montgomery, told investigators he had concerns that Adam was physically abusive to the child and was super short with her. Kevin Montgomery said he noticed Harmony had a black eye in July 2019, which his nephew confessed to causing by hitting her in the face, according to the criminal complaint. "I bashed her around this house," he said his nephew told him. Kevin said he contacted DCYF at that time, and he also noticed that his nephew subjected Harmony to other forms of abusive discipline, including scrubbing a toilet with her toothbrush and her being spanked hard on the butt. A neighbor said that it was a bad situation at the property, describing lots of people living there at different times, adults seen arguing in the street, junk left piled up in the yard, and the electricity is switched off at one point. The electricity was turned off, and they ran the generator all summer with the wiring running through the window. The neighbors said the Montgomerys were basically squatting at the home when it had fallen into foreclosure, and Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery were refusing to leave. "We didn't intermingle with them as it was a bad situation," she said. "There were lots of different people living there, piles of junk in the driveway, junk outside." She said she went away for the Thanksgiving holidays in 2019 and returned to find the family had finally packed up and moved out. And another neighbor on the street where Harmony lived also says that the family moved on Thanksgiving 2019, the same time Adam Montgomery says he last saw the missing child. Manchester police said definitively that Harmony has not been seen since around October or November 2019 when she was 5 years old. Yet a missing persons investigation was only launched in December 2021. Mrs. Sori has gone on public record to state that her daughter was failed by everybody. Despite multiple efforts to reach out to her daughter or at least find out more, no authorities concerned paid attention. And the girl's father clearly couldn't care less what happened to the child. The last confirmed sighting of Harmony by law enforcement was on the September 11th, 2019 when Manchester police officers were called to the home on 77 Guildford Street in Manchester where she lived. Police Chief Aldenberg, who is in charge of the case now, previously said the last police call up to the property was in October 2019, but confirmed he had muddled the dates in a press briefing on the January 12th. Despite the date change, the police chiefs and investigators are still working on the belief that Harmony was last seen on October or November of that year. Harmony's father and his wife were both arrested and charged on counts related to the missing child in early January. Adam Montgomery was arrested on the January 4th and charged with second-degree felony assault, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and 1 misdemeanor count of interference with custody. On the assault charge, he is accused of striking Harmony in the face sometime in July 2019, giving her a black eye according to the criminal complaint. Officials said Montgomery is not cooperating with the investigation into his daughter's disappearance, and he has refused to say where she is. The day after her husband's arrest, Kayla Montgomery was also arrested on 1 felony charge of welfare fraud for allegedly fraudulently collecting welfare benefits for the missing children between December 2019 and June 2021. Mrs. Montgomery, who has 3 children with her husband, is accused of obtaining $1,500 in food stamp benefits meant for Harmony between December 2019 and June 2021, even though the girl was not living with them. Prosecutors have now dropped that welfare fraud charge and added 3 new charges, 1 count of theft by deception and 2 misdemeanor charges of welfare fraud. The charges accuse Mrs. Montgomery of making intentionally false statements about her stepdaughter's whereabouts in February-March 2021 to claim benefits. After the police investigation into the case amped up, several disturbing details about Harmony's father came to light. Adam Montgomery has a history of violence and a long criminal record, including convictions or shooting a man in the head in a drug deal just 6 months before Harmony was born. He was also convicted in 2010 for attacking 2 women at gunpoint. It has emerged that Montgomery is a suspect in the cold case murder of a 28-year-old man in Lynn, New Hampshire back in February 2008. Darlene Guzman was shot in the chest in the parking lot of the former White Hen convenience store in Lynn's Austin Square on the night of February 10, 2008. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. A source in Boston law enforcement told reporters that Montgomery, who was 18 at the time, and 2 members of his family who were not named had been the focus of the murder investigation since day 1. The 3 family members had been in contact with the victim earlier that day and planned to meet with him at the convenience store before the meeting culminated in gunfire, according to the source. The victim's car was later found abandoned in the direction of Bedford, New Hampshire, where Montgomery lived at the time. No one has ever been charged with Mr. Guzman's murder, but the source said Montgomery remains the focus of the investigation to this day. Almost 14 years on from that killing, Adam Montgomery and his wife are now charged on counts related to his missing daughter. However, while charged with serious offenses, including child abuse and welfare fraud, no charges have been brought against anyone directly in connection to Harmony's disappearance. So why was Harmony not reported missing for 2 years? Mrs. Sori has accused the authorities of failing her daughter. She said she made multiple attempts to report concerns to child services. After November 18th, when she contacted Manchester police saying she believed her daughter was missing, someone finally paid attention. Police officers contacted the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, about the location of the missing child. Then, on December 27th, the DCYF reported that it was also unable to locate Harmony. Manchester police announced a search was launched on the December 31st. Emails sent by Mrs. Sori to the Manchester mayor's office begging for help in finding her daughter have also now come out. "Please, I'm begging for help in finding my daughter," she wrote on the December 29th. In her emails, Mrs. Sori said Adam Montgomery had never enrolled their daughter in school, and that she has missed important doctor's appointments she's had since a baby due to a disability in her eye. The emails were sent just 2 days before police finally reported Harmony missing. As well as the repeated attempts to raise the alarm, the family was well known to child services. Newly released records released on January 12th have emerged showing that police officers were called to the Guilford Street home at least 10 times between February 2019, when Montgomery got custody of Harmony, and when she was last seen in the fall. Reports ranged from claims of domestic disturbances to animal welfare and concerns about the living conditions in the home. The DCYF was notified about some of the incidents. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu announced on January 12th that the DCYF is carrying out an internal review of its handling of Harmony's case. However, the governor defended the state's work, saying, "As soon as we found out that this child may not have been showing up for school for quite some time, it was reported up to us. The team got right on it. It wasn't a delay. It didn't sit in a file on somebody's desk." An independent investigation is also being carried out by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate after Harmony was moved from Massachusetts into the custody of her father in New Hampshire in February 2019. No officials in New Hampshire and Massachusetts were passing the blame between each other. The New Hampshire governor sent a letter to Massachusetts court officials slamming a judge for placing Harmony in the care of her monster father, giving his violent past and long rap sheet. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker responded to the criticism by saying he felt his pain, but said he wants to wait and see the results of the independent review by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. Investigators have revealed very few details about what they think may have happened to Harmony. The Guilford Street property has been a focus of much of the search, with investigators seen in the home and the backyard for multiple days. However, Manchester police said the search had concluded there. It is not clear if anything of interest was uncovered, and no other locations where searches have been identified. Chief Aldenburg insisted on the January 12th that they are still working on the belief that Harmony is alive. However, he admitted that he was a little discouraged by the case so far and pleaded with the public to come forward with information. He added, "Somebody out there knows something." Despite the national attention and the painstaking efforts to find the missing child, investigators appear to have made very little headway. Though concerning, the lack of progress is perhaps unsurprising, as whoever has information about what happened to the little girl has had a more than a 2-year head start on the investigators. On the June 14th, 2022, law enforcement officials were seen transporting a refrigerator and taking potential pieces of evidence from the scene at a Manchester home where Harmony Montgomery's father and stepmother, Adam and Kayla, once lived. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer stated that bringing in the refrigerator is usually used to maintain biological evidence. If they found a body or body parts in a freeze, law enforcement would want to maintain the level of decomposition, Coffindaffer said. "I have a really creepy feeling about this. It's not good." Several law enforcement agencies were seen outside the Union Street apartment complex, where investigators were focused on the second-floor unit where Montgomery's father, Adam Montgomery, and his now estranged wife, Caleb, once lived. A woman called Darcy Hamilton, who lives behind the apartment complex, told a reporter that she briefly saw police enter the building on Monday and it seemed casual. But by 9 a.m. Tuesday, Hamilton said she saw a full-scale investigation from her balcony, which included 6 to 7 officers behind the building at any given time. She added that she saw an individual in an FBI t-shirt and one man in a hazmat suit, and noted that the front of the complex is a media circus. Investigators were later seen taking a refrigerator wrapped in biohazard tape from the apartment and loading it into a truck. A camera was also used to search the sewer in front of the building. I knew about the case since 2021 when Harmony was initially reported missing. It's all over Manchester on signs and billboards, Hamilton said, but I had no idea that her father had lived behind me. Noting that she has a 7-year-old daughter herself, Hamilton added that her heart is in my stomach right now, thinking that something could have happened to that little girl here. After this raid, Crystal Sari stated publicly, "I know in my heart this is no longer a rescue mission. They're looking for a body." In a disturbing follow-up, Kelsey Small, one-time girlfriend of the father of missing Harmony Montgomery, was recently found dead in Manchester, police said. Small, 27, was with Adam Montgomery when police found the homeless couple sleeping in a car on December 31st, 2021 in the early days of the search for Harmony. The cause of death is still pending, but it does not appear suspicious, said police spokeswoman Heather Hamill. According to court records, police were on their 4th day of searching for Harmony when they found Adam Montgomery and Small sleeping in a car on New Year's Eve. The car was parked on Harville Street on the west side, close to the Gifford Street home where the Montgomery family had lived 2 years earlier. Small told police she had been romantically involved with Adam Montgomery for more than a year. She knew he had 4 children from previous relationships, but he was not in touch with any of them and never talked about Harmony, she told police. She had no idea where Harmony might be. Police eventually arrested Adam Montgomery, but never charged Small with any crime. So what happened to Harmony Montgomery, and where is she now? If her father is innocent, why did he never report her disappearance? And when her mother, Crystal, tried to find her daughter, why weren't police and the local child protective services on her side? As this case unfolds, we hope that Harmony's mother finds the justice she deserves, whether her daughter is dead or living. Police have stated that Harmony is 8, and she should be wearing glasses due to her blindness in one eye. It's a heartbreaking story, and we hope with everything we've got that somehow against all odds, Harmony Montgomery might still be found alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.